my father died when I was very young as well. And unlike yourself, I really never knew my father very well. I met him 5 times. But when a boy loses his father, right when he needs him most, as he's entering the tween years, and I was 15 when my dad died, or nearly 16, it's very hard. And for me, it was probably doubly hard because when, I was only, put it this way, I was only 3 when my parents got divorced, and then my father evaporated out of my life. He was gone. He was very bitter at my mother, and she'd had an affair that made the newspaper columns with a famous Latin lover called Ruby Rosa. He was quite notorious, and he was known for his prowess in bed. And he married, I think, Jaja Gabor and Doris Duke, and a lot of American heiresses. My mother wasn't wealthy, although she was married to R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco scion, son of the man who founded Camel Cigarettes and Winston's. But my mother did have great, great beauty, and she'd been under contract to Warner Brothers as a starlet, and so, they had this affair. It got in Walter Winchell's column, and all that's in my book, The Gilded Leaf. But that ripped my father out of my life, and would lead to a lot of confusion. Sexual confusion. I mean, where's my dad? I really need a man's touch. I need a man's love. I'm hungering for my father. And, like a lot of boys get very confused. And, when I went to see a psychologist, which today I believe is simply a part of a good education, everyone should go to therapy. It should be required in college. But, I was informed and told that of course, I like women and all that in bed, but, the bottom line is that my father, his absence made me doubt myself. And I said, why do I have these feelings toward older men? And, am I gay? What's going on? And she said, no. She said, there's a hole in your heart from childhood from the man that was not in your life. You were deprived of male affection, and of course you hunger for that now. It's nothing to do with sex. It's really got to do with a childhood need that never got met. So maybe that will help you. I mean, I'm sure that you don't have any doubts like I did, but a lot of young guys do, and so I'm kind of open about talking about that, because I don't want young men who lose their father to go through what I went through. And Robert Bly, who wrote Iron John, the book that started the men's movement, he said, we're living in an age of feminized men. Women have become very assertive. A lot of us, didn't really have fathers, 50% divorce rate. So half of us didn't really have enough time with our dads, and he was out of the house. And that means that, in America anyway, how do we recover our masculinity? Who is our role model? How do we get through this? And we've done it in America and in Europe with a group called the Mankind Project, mankindproject.org. And they take you through a weekend and they train you how to be in a men's group, a self-led men's group. And then after that, you join a group, and it's really all about, connecting with other men in a deeply masculine way, standing your ground, so many things that are so great for men. And now I'm a bit involved in one of the founders of the Mankind Project, again, mankindproject.org, Bill Koth has now started a new group called Tribe, which incorporates bringing women into the groups. And you form a small tribe of, say, 10 men, 10 women, give or take. And again, it's self-led. And they train you how to behave in a small community so that there's, if you have, you don't gossip about each other behind each other's backs. If you have something to say or a conflict, you do it in front of the group, whether it's your men's group or the women's group or the joint group altogether that they do. So I'm very interested in Tribe. I'm just starting to look into it, and I think it might be my next big project. And I've just completed a big project, which may or may not become a force in the election of 2020. But I'm a liberal, a proud liberal, and I'm absolutely a Democrat, which means that I am not conservative. I'm, center left. And, I've been involved in a political action committee called Congress Majority. And our mission is to restore a democratic majority in Congress in the U.S. And I have not been very successful raising funds, but I'm hoping that we can make a difference in the election of 2020 as I build the group by adding on a top Democratic strategist, by adding on a top Democratic fundraiser. And once I have a team assembled, I think that we will attract some money and build into hopefully an influential organization for the election of 2020. We're not allowed to take money from anyone in Europe. You have to be an American to influence our election. So I'm not after dollars from anybody out there in Europe, but unless they have an American passport. But our website is congressmajority.org. So that's a little about me, and a lot more detail about me in my book. The book I wrote about the R.J. Reynolds family with a great biographer, Tom Shachtman, who's still a good friend. And it's called The Gilded Leaf. Gilded Leaf. The Gilded Leaf. And I'm actually had a meeting in Zurich over the summer in July with a producer who was one of the big producers on Grace of Monaco. And it's just perfect for, my mother's time in the south of France in the 50s when Ruby Rosa was courting her. And, it's perfect for going back into the 1920s is where I'd like to begin the series. It's kind of a cross between Downton Abbey and Boardwalk Empire.
Sure.
So I guess, you could say I'm a man with a lot of projects. And before I became an actor, I was wanting to be a filmmaker, and I went to film school at USC, University of Southern California, and UCLA, two of the best film schools in the United States, and never quite really made it as a director because I didn't have to join. I had inherited money, and I could make my own little films and not connect with other people, which is what I tended to do. So the lesson there is that you need to connect with other people, and you need to connect with people in your business and find a way to struggle your way up. I didn't have to. I could rent my own editing room, do my own films. So what happened to me in the course of co-creating in my life was I went to I went to a club one night, and I met this amazing girl, exotic. She was beautiful in an exotic way. I mean, very sweet and soft-spoken. I wanted to take her out, so I got her number at the club, and it turned out to be none other than Shelley Duvall, who was an actress working with Robert Altman at the time. And Shelley and I just fell in love. And I was living in a big castle in the Hollywood Hills, and we lived together for 2 years while she made the movie Nashville, and later she starred in Popeye, and then later in she starred in
The Shining.
The Shining, yes, The Shining with Stanley Kubrick and Jack Nicholson. So, Shelley was becoming a big star. I didn't like it. It was hard on my male ego. We broke up. I'm smiling now, and I think so fondly of her. And I've actually been in touch just recently with her. But basically, that led me into acting. She said, "Come and visit me on the set of Nashville. And if you do that, it'll be fine." I said, no, I won't fit in. I wanted to retreat into myself as usual, kind of a male thing to do, I guess. And I wanted to, not, go to this film set. So she goes all around the set. She's calling me every day, come and visit me, please. And she wanted support. So she is... Finally, she went all around. She went all around the set, and she told all the big stars in the movie, and there were many. My boyfriend's coming. He doesn't think he's going to fit in. Please be real nice to him, okay? So I went to the set of Nashville, and not knowing what to expect, I had very long hair. I was still in my hippie days from Berkeley in the late '60s, and hadn't cut my hair. I had become a major bodybuilder. I had started not major bodybuilder, but I had great body, and I was doing the bodybuilding at Gold's Gym with Arnold Schwarzenegger and some of those guys. But I wasn't anywhere near as big as they were. But I arrived there with the body of Adonis and long blonde hair, and Robert Altman was intrigued with me, and he had me, he cast me in the movie in a very glorified extra role, and everybody was so nice. Patrick, darling, how are you? There's really Christy in her trailer with her top off, and and others, Jeff Goldblum and Lily Tomlin and Henry Gibson and so many other stars in the movie, all being so nice to me, and so I stuck around. It kind of felt good. And Altman even said, "Do you want to be in the movie?" So that it didn't give me any speaking lines, but he did. It did lead to some speaking parts, and that's how I fell into acting. And I started studying, and I took it to heart. And I started studying with Lee Strasberg, in the master class. Lee Strasberg himself, Patrick, you have a quality. I think you could do Biff in Death of a Salesman, and I studied with Peggy Fury, Charles Conrad, and Igor DeMont, and I had this great big house in Bel Air, and eventually, after breaking up with Shelley, I bought a huge house because that was my revenge. Living well was the best revenge. And so one night I was just pounding the walls and crying and depressed, and I was just having a really awful time because my acting career wasn't going anywhere. I'd get like a little 3 or 4 line part in a TV show, and then out of that I would be, get all jacked up about acting and bring scenes in. And in my acting class in Hollywood, there was Patrick Swayze, there was Michelle Pfeiffer. It's funny how many people I've met in Hollywood over the years. I would be giving parties where attended by the likes of Christopher Reeve, who played Superman, and I don't know, so many. Robert De Niro came one night. We had a good yak.
Wow.
Dustin Hoffman, and I don't know who else. A lot of people would come to that parties, and we'd have these deep discussions. It was quite a time. But there I was, pounding the walls, crying, unhappy, depressed. My acting career isn't going well. And by this time, since I had 2 acting coaches, I had so many, I had a voice coach for singing, which I didn't want to learn, but the guy said, you have to learn to sing. And I had Charles Conrad as one coach, who said, never make any choices. And Lee Strasberg, who said, yeah, make a lot of choices. But you take a little from every teacher. But I also tried a psychologist. And a girl I went out with said, hey, you should really see my mother. She's a famous psychologist. And I said, there's something wrong with my mind. Why should I do that? And she said, no, you just do it. Go when you don't have a crisis. It's much more effective that way. You just work on the childhood stuff and deep stuff. So I thought, okay, I'll try it. I went to see the woman, whose name was Irene Casorla. She wrote some books. She was a genius. And Irene lived not too far from my house. So I started seeing Irene twice a week for therapy. And I would have I just really went for it. And that's when I discovered about my dad's absence and, how that had affected me. And I had low self-esteem. And anyway, there I am one day in a session. I said, Irene, I am just so depressed about my acting career. I'm not getting anywhere fast. I'm just really not. My acting career is, not going anywhere, and I think I'm just really depressed, and I don't know what to do. I'm feeling so sad all the time. Can't get arrested. And I had even begun developing my own property called, The Gift, and it was about a boy who died and came back to life with powers of healing and seeing the future. And I wanted to make that movie. And we made a 10-minute trailer starring me, because I wanted that part, and I funded it. And we shot it in Panavision. But I foolishly locked in my partner, the director, a guy that I was, I made as my partner in the business for that film. And, you know, we ran the trailer for the heads of Universal, Tom Mountain, Ned Tannen. We ran the trailer for Barry Diller at Paramount. And Barry Diller passed, but Tom and Ned Tannen liked the idea, but didn't want my friend as the director, so my partner there. So the bottom line is, by being loyal to him, I got screwed because they just passed on our project and they made a movie with an almost identical plot called The Resurrection.
Right.
So meanwhile, all these bad things that happened to me in the business. I had an idea stolen. My acting work was not going that well. I was getting cast in small parts in TV and films, but not enough, and to really get any kind of traction in Hollywood. And by now I had built up my self-esteem and therapy, so that helped. But still, it wasn't happening. Said to Irene, my shrink, I said, "Hey, it is not happening. I am not getting roles. I'm so sad. I'm so just depressed, Irene." And she looked at me, and I expected tea and sympathy. And Irene, my genius shrink, said, "You want to be an actor?" She said, "Move your ass." She said, "Work harder. You live in a mansion. You get up at 10 in the morning." She said, "Move your ass and work harder." And I looked at her and I said to her, "Screw you, Irene. How dare you talk to me that way?" But she had trained me to answer her that way. Get the anger out, look her in the eye, and say, "Screw you," which is exactly what I did. And I was furious. And she just sat back in the chair and watched me. And I finally went back home, and guess what happened? The depression lifted. No more depression. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I accepted after denying and then being angry, and then finally I came to acceptance of what she said. Yeah, I had to work harder. And I was partying a lot and staying up late and dating actresses and beautiful models, and oh my God, I had a great life, living in this, and celebrities as friends and so on. Somehow stayed out of the tabloids, but because I never had a press agent, which is just fine. And I started working harder, and the depression didn't come back. Well, about a year later, I went back and had another session with her, and the depression came back a little bit. And I said, it even crossed my mind, just casually mentioned. I even thought, I even thought of suicide. And she looked at me and she said, and she leaned back in her chair, and she said, and I expected sympathy. She said, "That's a fair choice." And I said, "What do you mean it's a fair choice?"
Jesus.
I said, "Screw you!" So the rest of the hour, same exact trajectory. I realized later that if I ever did such a foolish thing, such a weak thing to do, instead of staying and fighting for everything I'm worth, that the world would go on, nothing would change. And she just leaned back in her chair after saying to me, "That's a fair choice," and watched me. And I got angry and went through the emotional turbulence that went along with this reaction from her. And I realized that it was really about attention. I just wanted attention. This is why I'm throwing this out on the table. So, bottom line, being in therapy was a great thing for me. Gave me a lot of clarity about my childhood, my mother's treatment of me, and my father's absence. All of that taken together, helped me become the man I am. So, bottom line, I'm going to let you, Lydia, that I've been yakking on here a little about my life. And now that we got all that out of the way, what would you like to know?
No, it's really interesting. It's fascinating, in fact, Patrick. It's really interesting. You've obviously lived a very interesting life in general, really. There's some stuff in there that I want to touch on later because it's really, really interesting. And I think that there's some really nice sort of little segues that we can go down. But I suppose, obviously, you spoke about the fact that you got into the acting game and you tried hard eventually. And then at some point, the idea of, auditioning for Eliminators came in front of you. So just talk to me about how that opportunity came about.
Oh, sure. That's actually we're going to drill down into my life where I'm at a point now where I've, tried hard to make acting work. I don't think I was ever a great actor, but I could have been with a little more self-esteem if I'd been in therapy earlier and had a dad around to show me what a man is. So bottom line is, I had not done well at acting. I met a girl that I had fallen in love with and proposed to. Mm-hmm. She was German, from Germany. Her name was Regine Wall, if you will. And Regina and I, got married in 1993 in a big, wonderful jet set wedding attended by, billionaires like Johannes Turner, Texas, and Robin Williams had been a friend. He came to the wedding. Dodi Fayed, who later dated Princess Diana, came to the wedding, and he brought the best man, who was his first cousin, Mohammed Khashoggi, the son of the arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, who was really my best friend in those years. And he was just such fun, and we had partied, and, I met them at their estates all over the world, and had and sailed on a 300-foot yacht with them, and they had many private planes, including two DC-7s, a DC-8. Khashoggi lived high, and he courted the Saudi royals and provided quite a lot of entertainment for them, and made a lot of arms for the Saudi government, so made billions. And anyway, his oldest son, Mohammed, and I were great friends, and so it was really through Mohammed who was better friends with Robin Williams than I was, and through and Dodi Fayed, who was Mohammed's first cousin, who made the movie Breaking Glass and Chariots of Fire. And Dodi wanted to be in Hollywood, and he had funded some quite successful films. And so bottom line, there I'm getting married. I went to work, and I said, you know what? My wife's father owns a nice bus company. They had 300 tour buses in Europe. And I am going to go to work for my father-in-law and just stop acting. Yes, I'm writing the book about the Reynolds family. That was the only foothold I had left in the entertainment business, was the story of the Reynolds family, with an eye to not just writing a book about the amazing story of the R.J. Reynolds family, but also to having it and to producing it as a series for TV. And later, by the way, when the book came out, all the networks said, well, people won't tune in to more than 2 to 4 hours. And I said, you're wrong. I said, this book is at least 10 to 14 hours, and they will tune in week after week. And they said, no, they won't. And so the book sat in mothballs, and now 30 years later, we may have a development deal with Silver Reel, who made so many great films. But bottom line, let me see. So you asked me about how did Eliminators come about. I have now gone to work for my German father-in-law, Fritz Wall, who had a family company in the bus business. They owned tour buses, and they were in many cities around Europe. And Fritz said, why don't you come to work with me? So I said, that's great. I'm going to need some time, because I'm writing the book about the Reynolds family, but I'm co-writing it with my writer, with whom I was packaged by William Morris Agency in Hollywood, thanks to my efforts. But other than that, I can work in the bus business with you. So we toured Europe. We met the owners of a lot of bus companies, and my ex-father-in-law was able to, borrow quite a lot of money based on the fact that his daughter was married to R.J. Reynolds' heir, even though I was never that much of an heir. My father left almost all the money to his last wife, who lives today in Switzerland, and I have a good relationship with her. But I had to go out and work, and that is what my father intended. So I was never, even though I had a couple of million when I was young, given my lack of fathering, and I lost a lot of that money. So probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because I had to go to work, and I had to figure out how the world works and how can I make a little money. So, which that's good. In rich families, if you make your kids struggle, you will stay strong and powerful. If you just give them everything easily when they're young, they will become alcoholics and deadbeats. And, my father was an alcoholic and got a lot of money young, and a playboy, and all of that. So because he made me work, that's partly why I am the man I am today. Although I'd like to have had a lot more funding from my political action committee. But, those are the breaks of the game. Now, how did Eliminators come about? I know I'm being so wordy. Let's get right to it.
No, that's fine. Just honestly, it's really interesting, Patrick. So just feel free to carry on.
Good. Well, let me answer your question. I'll do it in a short. You can cut all that out if you want, and I'll do a short version of that. At this point, I had given up acting and stopped acting lessons and stopped trying to have an agent. My agent went out of business, and it was hard to get another one. I had gotten close to some roles like part of the captain in Star Trek Next Generation, but they gave it to the role of captain to Patrick Stewart because he could do Shakespeare. So in Hollywood, the role is cast the most, not to looks, but cast to talent and ability. If your whole budget is on the line and your name is a producer, you want reliable people in front of the camera. So I was more of an unproven quantity, even though I had started Eliminators. Moving on, I was out of the business at this point around 1983, the year I got married in Germany, in the big Jesuit wedding, and I was out of the film business, and I was working for my father-in-law, a German bus tycoon, and my agent called a few weeks after that and said, Patrick, do you want to go on one more audition? She said, I know you're not really acting anymore, but I was your agent, and you screen tested for these people about a year ago, and they want to see you. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, it's a science fiction movie. It's the lead starring part. You play a robot. I said, a robot? What do you mean a robot? Can they see my face? And she said, oh yeah, only one quarter, the upper quarter of your head will be metal, but the lower three quarters, that they're going to see your face. And so I said, well, I'll go on the audition. So for once in my life, and this is a message to all the actors out there, instead of being cowing and being nervous in the audition, am I good enough for this part? I'm really great. I'm just been working so hard. Give me the role. I need it. I got to have it. Instead of that energy, now I didn't need the role. I wasn't so much caring about it. And I said, I'd be good in this part. I'd love to do the role. And, confident, casual, and I left. And, of course, that afternoon the phone rang, and I got the part. So there I was, totally thrown into confusion because I had quit acting. I started to really not like Hollywood. I didn't like all the games and all the stuff that people put up with. And I psyched myself up, no more Hollywood. And here I am, thrust into doing a starring part in a film. It meant that I had to go back to my acting workshops, brush up all of my training, memorize some scenes, do the scene work, and I did go back and do all that. And meanwhile, we thought the movie would start right away. Well, no, they kept saying, well, we lost the money. And they took a year to find the money to make Eliminators. And I think maybe they thought that I was going to fund it, and I didn't have that kind of money. But everyone thought that I had hundreds of millions, being from the Reynolds family. But they finally found the $2.5 million for the budget somewhere, and I was going down on costume fittings, and the director wanted me all muscular, so I went back to my weight training, and I was working out and dieting, and I hired a training coach with my own money, and they finally got the money, and we made the movie in the summer of 1985. And 3 or 4 days, no, 5, start again. 8 or 9 days before the start date of Eliminators, the day that I was supposed to show up in Madrid and report for duty for this starring role in this film, my mother died. She died unexpectedly, and it was out of nowhere. She wasn't sick. She had nothing going on. She was 67 years old, living in her condo in Miami Beach, in South Beach, and before South Beach became South Beach, and 1985, and I, had to bury her, and I hired 3 secretaries, and I said, we're going to rent out the house. That was already in progress for the film because I knew I'd be going away. but we're also now going to bury my mother. And I said, I've got to just, take care of all the arrangements. And that fell on me. Mm. And it got done. And I, was full of grief and sadness because she died unexpectedly. And, when you lose a parent, it ain't easy. I mean, I never really had a dad. So there I've lost the one parent that I really had. And all these memories came flooding back of what little things she did for me when I was little. And I had to pull over to the side of the road and just bawl my eyes out and cry. And my therapist said, let those feelings come, let them be there. She was Jewish. The Jews, they said rock at a shiva in a chair. And they just rock their bodies back and forth and let the grief go through them. And, so they can process it and get done with it, and they grieve and they sit in a room all together and rock in chairs. It's a shiva, grieving. And I, just let myself, even though I was by myself in the car, pull over to the side of the road and rock and cry. And I just let the feelings come to me. The Stevie Wonder song came on the radio. I just called to say I love you. And I realized there would be no more phone calls with her. And so, anyway, moving along. There I am at Eliminators, reporting for duty. My mother was lowered into the ground. The limo took me to the airport, got on the plane to go star in Eliminators. And, it was quite a not an easy shoot, but really one of the great adventures of my life. Being in speedboats and 100-degree sun, encased in a fiberglass robot suit, which I would plead with Peter Manoogian, the director, said, please, Peter, can we take off my legs? Because we got the master shot, so that needed the whole costume on. And then he said, well, the legs might be in the shot. So he said, I guess we'll take. So he saw that I was struggling here with the heat inside the suit. They were holding black umbrellas over me. It was a riot. And not easy. They would take off my arm, which was a laser gun. When they took off the arm, poured out probably a pint of sweat from the arm piece that I had on. So this is a little taste of the film. We all thought we were going to be big stars and famous. I think everyone, when they get their first lead role in a movie, thinks that. And some of us did better than others, but nobody became a major star. But shooting the film was one of the great adventures of my life. Peter Manoogian was a really skilled, wonderful, talented director. He was great to work with, and everyone in the film was all excited and cast really beautifully. And the film later came out in January of 1986, and it was in 1,200 theaters. Empire Pictures, who produced it. And I'm sure you've read David Jay's book, The Empire of the Bees, for which I was interviewed along with Peter Manoogian and Charlie Band himself, who was with Empire. The book pointed out that the movie was released in 1,200 theaters in the U.S., around 1,200, I think. And it made its money back. It did okay, but it wasn't the big success that Empire had been hoping for, so financially. And there you have it. I mean, we thought we were going to be big stars. None of us really were. But, looking back, would I change it? Would I do it again? Yeah, absolutely. It was a great ride.
Yeah, I mean, two things there. I mean, look, just off the record, it's really interesting. There's a lot of parallels between our two lives. And I lost my mum 2 years ago, who was also Jewish, probably at a similar age that you were as well. And it seems that we've gone through sort of quite similar things in terms of big things happening in our lives. And I totally understand what you were going through. It must have been really, really difficult at the time, particularly as you were doing the project of Eliminators.
Well, it was. I had to put my grief on hold and just shut it down. And I had time to grieve in the time after. I didn't have time to process because we were working so hard in the movie, and it was required that I be, on the set. And if you look at Eliminators, and you see that Mandroid is sort of this sullen. The character was meant to be sullen and morose, angry. So I brought all of that. from my mother's death to the part.
So,
but yeah, you went through this. You went through something similar too, and I so you have at least you have an appreciation of what I was going through.
Yeah, I mean, particularly the Jewish side of it as well, right? I mean, my mum was Jewish as well. I mean, my father wasn't. My mum was by no means a practicing Jew, but I understand the ceremony of Shiva, having sitting Shiva, and almost deliberate grief, and really embracing the grief and really making sure you have a period to grieve. And I think it's what I like about the Jewish religion is the fact that the body's buried quite early, and I think that can really help with creating a bit of closure and obviously moving on quite quickly. But you mentioned something before there, Patrick, which is really interesting. You said afterwards that you guys at the time were thinking you were part of something really big that was going to sort of kickstart your career. I suppose a really good question at this stage would be to understand, this film came out in 1986, right? And it was at the boom of the kind of Hollywood sci-fi action movie era.
Right.
But it was before films like Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. It was before some films that came out in the late 80s. What do you think the everlasting effect of Eliminators is on cinema and the decade of the 80s?
Well, gosh, I that's hard for me to comment on what is the everlasting effect. It has maybe an everlasting effect on some of the young fellows who saw the movie back when it was in theaters. I'll get an email from a young fellow who said, "Oh, this Mandroid character that you did in Eliminators was a big influence on my life, and I, can't tell you, it's such a pleasure to be in touch with you. You were my hero." And actually, to those guys, here's what I would say. I like the book Wayne Dyer, Dyer, the famous psychologist Wayne Dyer. What he said in Your Erroneous Zones, which is probably his greatest book, and he wrote so many. There's a chapter called Hero Worship, and he talks about the zones in which people fall into error. Your erroneous zones, not your erogenous zones. Your erroneous zones, the places that you probably are pitfalls where you may make mistakes. And he talked about hero worship. And in that chapter, and I tell this to kids when I speak at schools with my tobacco prevention talk and my vaping prevention talk, which I give all over the country and sometimes internationally, I say to them, look, there are very few real heroes in this world. And there are, most people are just out for themselves. Am I a hero here today? No, I get paid to be here speaking. I like my job. I don't see myself as that big a hero. But there are real heroes out there. And yeah, some of the things I did in my life took a little courage. But the point is that there are very few real, genuine heroes. And when you hero worship, and here's the juice, when you hero worship, you give away a big part of yourself. Wow, you're so great. You're just amazing. And you're belittling yourself, Wayne Dyer says. And he's right. So hold your ground, stand your ground, and say, I admire your work. But don't hero worship to the point where you give so much of yourself away. And he says that the flip side, the dark side of that whole piece, is when things go wrong and you're blaming people. In one case, people hero worship. Another, they blame. And it's the same situation, he points out. He says that when things go wrong, you blame somebody outside yourself. And you find some other thing outside yourself to blame. That's the same thing. Instead of giving away all the credit, like when you hero worship, now you're giving away all the responsibility. And so don't make the mistake of either hero worshiping because you too are a hero. And I tell that to the kids in schools I speak to. And I said, don't forget, and there are very few real heroes in the world. And further, when things go wrong, remember that it might be partly your responsibility as well. And that's something that I think is a good message for a lot of young ones to hear, especially when they've maybe hero worshipped a little too much,
Okay, yeah,
part of being in therapy involves seeing the good things your mother did and your father, and the bad things they did, and making a separation. And you begin to see and get clarity instead of hero worshiping your mother or hero worshiping your father, you say, they were really good over here, but boy, they sure fell down in this department.
But isn't that slightly dichotomous though, Patrick? Because I'm guessing that one of your influences or one of your inspirations for becoming an actor was to be a hero to people. So, I mean, I don't know when you read this book or when you came with this revelation, but I'm guessing that, with all these things, I'm guessing your role of being an actor wasn't just about self-fulfillment. It was about being a hero to other people, right? Is that not true?
Oh yeah, sure. If I'm going to be totally honest about it, I hadn't read that book until many years later. But why did I want to be an actor? I mean, let's face it, I came from a family of major achievers. The Reynolds Empire, the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. My grandfather, R.J. Reynolds, made Camel cigarettes popular, and he made hundreds of millions of dollars and made many millionaires, 70 millionaires in Winston-Salem alone, left each of his children $28 million in the middle of the Depression. In 1932, my dad got $28 million. So I had my father used a lot of his money for obviously extravagant living and partying and hanging out with all of the notables of the eras in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, before descending into alcoholism and smoking caused death. But I was coming from a lot of achievers, and I needed to get out of the shadow of my famous rich family. I wanted to do something on my own. My mother said, "You can be anything you want," and I believed her. And the point is that acting was a way where no family money could help me. Nothing could help me. When you're out on stage, saying your lines and becoming that character and believing that you are that character in that moment, staying in the moment, getting your attention off yourself and onto the person you're working with, all of that technique in acting, none of the money, all the money in the world could not help you when you're out on stage. And I was out on stage with kids who had no money, others who were working in TV and films. Patrick Swayze and Michelle Pfeiffer had never yet made a film back when we were in class together, but we knew they would because they started on Broadway shows, musicals. So anyway, I wanted to be an actor to get out of the shadow of my family. I think some people have the gene. It's not partly environmental, but maybe genetic. They have to do something where they're going to get noticed. Notice me. Look at me. Go ahead and oh gosh, I will achieve. Look what I am doing. So look at me. I'm trying to elect Democrats to Congress. I want to create, foster the idea of men getting into men's groups, self-led groups, and being trained as to how to behave in them. So the group stays together. That's the Mankind Project. And Tribe is a way of getting men and women into small communities that are free of gossip, unless you're going to just say whatever you have to say in front of the whole group. And there's a training that you go through to learn how to do that. So I think this new group, Tribe, that I'm interested in co-founding with Bill Koth, will do a long way. So anyway, these are big projects. Producing a series about my family's story for TV. All those things, acting. Before that, I wanted to be a director. And do they want to make a film that would change the world? Yes. Do I still? Sure. I'd love to see a film about David Korten, Korten, davidkorten.com, and you'll learn more about him there. But, I chose the Democrats because they're somebody you could actually vote for. David Korten, we can't quite vote for him yet, but he never will. He's an old man. But his genius is his books and his thinking, and it's probably too progressive and too out there. But I believe it is the coming thing in consciousness, and where our consciousness needs to go. David Korten has got some pretty good ideas, maybe some bad ideas, but mostly a lot of pretty good ones. So these are big projects. These are big, undertakings, and I just gravitate toward them, even if I don't have the money. I don't have the connections because I tend to be more of a loner, and I'm learning that I have to connect with other people to be successful. And that's a lesson for my whole life. It's my one failing. I haven't connected when I could. As a Reynolds, I have access to. I did try calling George Soros. I tried calling all of the top donors to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Some of the labor unions who give millions to Democratic PACs. But because I didn't have the right team in place, I didn't attract the money. So that has to do, I think, the lesson for me is build your team and put the right group together, and you will attract the money with luck.
Yeah.
Even then, there are no guarantees.
So, Patrick, it's been a real honour talking to you. You've lived a fascinating life. From the activism that you're doing now around anti-smoking, some of the incredible stuff you're doing with bringing males to the forefront and what is a largely overlooked group, and finally playing the role of Mandroid, which has left a very special space in all of our hearts. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure and a real honour.
Well, it's been therapeutic for me, and you're a wonderful interviewer. Boy, you got me to talk.
Cheers, Patrick.